Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Kerry James Marshall. And I want to welcome you to an exciting evening of championship mudslinging here at the MCA Chicago. Tonight we have two Hall of Fame heavyweight curators of the museum world who will both entertain and enlighten you in a no-holds-barred, knock-down, drag-out exchange of ideas right here on the MCA stage. First up, coming out of Los Angeles, where she once held the position of chief curator at LA MoCA, by way of the Fog and ICA in Boston and the Wexner Art Center in Columbus, Ohio, a native of Chickasaw, Alabama, which was a surprise to me. The author of several books and numerous essays on art, standing at 5'9" tall, weighing about 147 pounds. We have Helen, the Lady Molesworth. Her interlocutor, representing Chicagoland, was born in Lima, Peru, raised in Caracas, Venezuela, and London, England, who comes to Chicago as a veteran of many museums from California to Pennsylvania, and holding the title of director of the MCA for the last 15 years and counting. What did you say? Heavyweight. 15 years and counting. She's 5'5" tall, weighing in at about 137 pounds, dressed in comme des garçons. I want everybody to put your hands together and welcome and give some love to Madeleine Grynsztejn. Now, Helen and Madeleine, you know how it's done. I want you both to come out swinging, and let's hear you dish some dirt. Thank you.
He is so bad. He's so bad. Who was that?
May I?
Yeah, go. Margiela.
According to my Wikipedia page, I was born in Chickasaw, Alabama. But I was not. I was born in Buffalo, New York, and my parents got themselves to Queens, New York. By the time I was 1, I am a native New Yorker.
All right.
However, a very, very, very good friend of mine told me I should never try and change that because it would make it very hard to steal my identity. So I've let it stand. A fundamental mistruth.
Look at that misinformation making its way through Mr. Brilliant over there. So,
That's what that MacArthur Genius Grant will get you.
you know, I'm telling you.
Reading them Wikipedia pages.
I'm telling you, that guy with that Royal Academy London, retrospective coming up in 2 years, he should, you would think he would,
You would think.
You'd think.
Royal Academy, right there on Piccadilly.
I mean, really.
Piccadilly.
And then the retrospective, like, here, hello, 2016 to where? The Met?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York?
Was
in
that
New York.
you and me? Was that you and me?
I think that might have been us. That was my hometown museum.
Oh yeah, right. Because yeah, that's right.
Then it went to LA.
And then it went to the museum that shall not be named.
Never.
Yeah, I know. Before we jump in, Helen and I want to thank our partners to my left, Vera Marie Baldosa and Elizabeth Luschik, who are helping us with American Sign Language translation.
Thank you.
And we always and also want to thank Daniel Atkinson, who made this evening happen. Thank you, Daniel. So we're going to dive right in, and behind us at some point that Daniel decides, because he knows better than we do, there's going to be a kind of rolling PowerPoint that'll give you some sense of both how Helen has intersected and interacted with the MCA over the years, including here. You're watching Luke Toymans paint a mural right on our atrium as part of the retrospective that we co-organized in 2010, she and I. And it was the last thing that I did as chief curator at SF MoMA before becoming a first-time director, and Helen was my partner in that all the way, and vice versa, right? So that was good fun.
That is it. And then we made This Will Have Been, Art, Love, and Politics in the 1980s.
That's right.
And then we made that little Kerry James Marshall show.
Oh yeah, that one.
Just a little show.
How much do you think he weighs?
Well, I have to say, when I saw him today, I saw him out of the corner of my eye.
I'm like, oh, you look
And
good.
I thought maybe he had dropped a pound or two.
And me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Must be all that painting.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Helen.
Do you think we're swinging hard enough yet, or should we go in the paint just a little? Should we wait?
I think we're going to wait.
We're going to wait. We'll go in the paint. We'll take it to the paint.
I want to start with the question that is the elephant in the room in this
the elephant in the
batshit
room.
crazy world.
Do you mean that Carrie's here?
No, I'm not talking about Carrie. I'm talking about museums. So we are in a space and place where everything is very, very wounded, locally, nationally, globally. Museums have a very important job to do, in my opinion, in terms of creating a space where these differences may be bridged. I don't consider that a relativist position. I consider that an anti-dogmatic position. I consider that a position. You have, over the years, made many critical comments about museums, and I quote, "The museum is a fundamentally 18th century institution that finds itself stumbling into the 21st century. In this regard, it is much like the library, the university, the newspaper, Enlightenment institutions that are all facing a reckoning." Now, today, in the world that we're living in now, do you still consider museums unredeemable, as you once said?
Well, as I see it, one of the primary functions of criticism is to look at the things that you love and try to figure out, why do you love them? What are they doing to engender your love? And then what are they doing in the world? And so my criticism of museums, which has been, I would say, fairly steady, is born, in fact, of how much I love them. And so when they fail, or when they stumble, I think it behooves those of us who care the most about them to talk about that publicly. So I have talked about the things that I felt were very structurally wrong with the museum as an institution. However, the great line that I wrote that everyone always quotes, the unredeemable line, I wrote that line in an essay about the artist Simone Lee. Mm-hmm. And Simone Lee had produced a body of work that really came out of a kind of theoretical tradition of Afro-pessimism, and that came onto a kind of New York professional art scene with a whole set of references that most folks in the New York art scene weren't that familiar with. And so when I wrote that her work made me wonder whether or not the project of the display of culture was redeemable or not, the word in the sentence for me that was the most important was the word wondering. Because I was trying to take Simone Lee's critique of the museum very seriously. And unlike the institutional critique artists of the 60s and 70s that I had cut my teeth on, who were in many ways trying to expand the physical boundaries of the museum in order to critique its behaviors and operations, Simone Lee, it occurred to me, was doing something a little more difficult, which was she was going to put those profoundly questioning objects in the museum and see what happened. And one effect of her objects on me was to unravel my sense of assuredness about a bunch of things, that we could have a shared set of references, that we could have a shared set of stories, that we could talk to each other in certain ways in the context of the museum as it currently existed. And her objects had the force of challenging my faith in many of those operations. It wasn't only her objects, but there was something about the way her objects operated that really shook me. And I remain grateful for the shaking. Because the problems that we face in the museum are oftentimes the problems that we have in the world. They're condensed and localized, and because we traffic in art, we traffic in the symbolic. So everything we do, everything we say, everything we talk about in here becomes symbolic. And it seemed to me if we had that kind of power, we better get down to working out what we weren't doing well.
Yeah, I agree. It's also what James Baldwin said. I love America, and therefore, I'm going to put it under a hot spotlight. And we have all learned a lot every day, and especially in the last 4 years. At the same time, I find it really, I would say, paradoxical that other areas of the art ecosystem, and particularly commercial galleries, auction houses, et cetera, have adopted characteristics that traditionally belong to museums as part of their operations.
Yep.
And in line with that, there's this. I've been thinking about your career, and it's almost as if your career reflects a kind of movement of where power dynamics are sitting and are migrating over the course of the last 30 years. You began with a PhD as an art historian. You went on to become a curator. You went on to become an independent curator. You then and now entered into a professional commercial gallery affiliation. From there, you've gone on to being a podcast, and then full circle, you've come back to being a writer. And by the way, that's your girl, Susan Dackerman, who we love and miss tonight. So I am particularly interested in wanting to understand what you think about that, what you think about the kind of adoption by the commercial sphere of certain things that belonged to the museum. They have Family Day at Sotheby's. Give me a break. And I am wondering, why did you make this leap? What is happening, and what remains for the museum?
Well, there's a lot of questions in that. That's a lot. So yes, my quote-unquote career trajectory has taken me in ways that I did not expect. Actually, even before I was a curator, I was a university professor. When I got a PhD, I thought that's what I would do. My father was a university professor, and I used to joke that I was very lucky that he wasn't a coal miner, because I probably would, you know what I mean? I had he was a domineering person, and I craved his approval, and so I became a professor. You know, you do a lot of things in life for reasons, well, sometimes you don't know the reasons, you find them out later. But, you know, it's funny. When I was an academic in the late 90s and I got my first museum job, I actually lost some friends because they felt I had gone over to, as they said, and I quote, the dark side.
Times have changed.
Times have changed. And then when I left the museum, which is a really polite thing to say because it's not exactly how it happened. Yeah.
Say it.
When you get fired, they take away the chair.
Like literally?
Literally. Like, it's a game of musical chairs. And unlike basketball where you could just be traded, I didn't get traded. I got fired. And when you get fired, you are subject to what Doris Salcedo calls social death. And there's no more chair for you. So the gallery world, in the inimitable words of Jose Canseco, have been very, very good to me. So one of the things that you've seen in a shift of former museum staff going to galleries is that.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at the roster, you'll see a lot of people who got fired. So there's that. Girls got to make a living. But then when I was thinking about what it would mean to be in the gallery world, one of the things I thought was, well, all of my friends who are artists are in the gallery world, and no one gives them any guff about it. So I was like, I'm not an artist, but I feel very artist adjacent. And luckily for me, particularly with people like Jack Shaman and David Zwerner, people who I had known for decades because I had worked with artists that they represented, they didn't come to me and say, would you like to be in sales? Because they knew I wasn't going to be any good at that. And oddly enough, a lot of museum directors had kind of asked me to be in sales. And I wasn't.
By which you mean sitting at a table raising money for a show.
I was often a shiny lure thrown out into the ocean.
You're so good at it, too.
Until you're not.
I miss ya.
Until you're not. So I think the galleries also, Carrie James Marshall once said about the museum that the museum is a competitive arena. There is only so much wall space. And that's true in the gallery world as well. It's a competitive arena. And they smelled weakness on the part of the museums. The museums started worrying about things that weren't art objects and weren't artists. And the galleries did not take their eye off the art object artist ball, not for a second. That is the bread and butter. So I came up in a time when museums purported to be artist-centered. But by the time I left the game, there was not an artist-centered museum that I really knew about. I knew artist compromise over and over and over again. And I also saw people beginning, if I'm honest, beginning to lose their way about what I thought was important, which is to take very seriously the intellectual, emotional, aesthetic, and psychological proposition that is an art object, and to try to understand it to place it in context, and to create a framework around it so that it could be seen such that it could do its work. And it turns out that the galleries were more willing to let me do that kind of work than the museums.
Let us understand that's because they have more overhead capacity. So
Girl, you have no idea.
Let us understand that we're not taking our, I mean, I agree
You
with
have
you
no
maybe
idea.
about a couple museums, but we're not like that. And and you know that it's because museums have been exhausted of resources by all manner of, all manner of histories. And so if we're taking our eye off the ball, it's because we are out there racing for the resources that we need in order to keep our eye on the ball. That is often how and why galleries might get there first. And I don't consider it at all a fair situation, because ultimately the audiences are different and the bottom line is different. But yeah, it often comes out that way. You mentioned the museum that shall not be mentioned and the reasons why you have no chair there. And it's a segue. One of the reasons is because you were not in favor and were very compelling about not having a Carl Andre retrospective. So this is the segue, because you have extended your work magnificently, not only beyond extraordinary exhibitions in the gallery space, like Ruth Asawa most recently, Noah Davis, but also you have, not to mention the book that we're here for, and stay behind because she's signing a bunch of books and you're buying them, but you also did this extraordinary podcast called Death of an Artist, on the life of Ana Mendieta, whose images you see pop up once in a while. 1 million downloads.
Isn't that crazy?
On many, many best of 2022 lists, including The Atlantic, The Economist, focused around 35, around this story that has been in the art world 35 years now, about Carl Andre regarding his wife, Ana Mendieta, and her fall from a Greenwich Village apartment window in 1985. And the podcast really is about the silence of the art world. Tell us why that's such a good place for you to talk about both the art world, Ana Mendieta, women, and yourself.
You mean the particular story or the form of the podcast itself?
The fact that at the end of the day, it's about the silence of the art world, or certainly in part. But talk about the podcast in any way you like. It is incredible for those of us who may not have heard it.
For some reason that I still don't know if I fully understand about myself. But for some reason, I am someone, and this happened to me early as a child. I was someone who was aggrieved by people who didn't say what they meant or felt or knew or thought to be true. I always found this very, very troubling. And I think it has something to do with a kind of sense of the way when one is a child. When I was a child, I was very aware that, I don't know how else to say it. I was just really, really aware very early on about how shit was fucked up.
You think it had something to do with your family? I'm sorry.
It totally had something to do with my family. But it also had something to do with, I did grow up, I grew up in a working class neighborhood. And I just knew the way certain people were treated was not right. I grew up with a sense of injustice. And so by the time I got to the Anamandiata moment, and the idea that I would work somewhere that would celebrate Carl Andre, it was just really tough. I was like kind of humming with a rage and a resentment, and because what we do is symbolic, because what we do matters. And I couldn't imagine what it must have been like to be like a teenage girl in Los Angeles, of all places, where when I drove to work, I often felt like the city was just Latinx. It was a black and brown city, and I just couldn't abide. I didn't know how I could face a young girl in the galleries. And I thought, after it was all done and dusted, I thought, surely I could get people to talk. Surely people would talk to me. Surely they would trust me. Surely I had put in enough. I had put in my 10,000 hours, and I thought that people would trust me and talk to me. And when they wouldn't, I was like, well, then we're just going to go there. I just couldn't abide it. And I can't do that about everything, because it'd make me crazy. It'd make me crazy. But I could do it about her.
Can you enjoy an artwork by an artist that you find personally reprehensible?
Sure. I'm a profoundly flawed human being. I'm an ideological subject. I'm white. I was raised to be a white heterosexual woman. And that is, I don't know if you know, but that's a lot. That is one twisted subjectivity. It is. It's a very twisted subjectivity. And so, yeah, of course I can like work by people who've done horrible things. I was raised to be okay. I was raised to do that. I'm very good at it. And I'm filled with profound questioning about what it means to do such a thing.
And those questions are all beautifully, and as you are here and always, honestly, in a complicated way, put out in your book. And let's talk about the book. You've got gorgeous, gorgeous lines in the introduction about what writing is, what it does for you, how it's the thread of your intellectual life and your soul, and the way you think the world, your world, into being. So, why write? Tell us why write.
Well, I write because writing is a form of thinking. Art making is a form of thinking. Music is a form of thinking. Dancing is a form of thinking. Science is a form of thinking. So the process of writing for me, I don't figure out what I think and then go and write it down, right? Like writing and thinking are... There's no separation between those things for me. They are twinned and braided in my brain. So writing for me is the way I come to terms with the knowledge that I think is being offered by an art object. And art objects are, for me, the most powerful framework through which I experience and understand and query the world that I am in. That is what my life has been. So I don't see the world through the lens of science. I see the world through the lens of art. So Dawood Bey's in the audience, and he took that really important photograph of David Hammond selling snowballs on the street in New York. And I was lucky enough to install that photograph once in an art exhibition. And the day I was in my car, and I saw in Baltimore, of all places where people can be very, very poor, and I saw a black man on the street. And in the wake of Dawood Bey's photograph, I was able to think to myself, that brother could be David Hammond's.
Thanks to Dawood.
Thanks to that whole situation. That one simple photograph changed how I move through the world. And I could tell you stories like that till the cows come home.
And don't you want that also for everybody who looks at the shows that you curate? I mean, I found this beautiful, I know this about you, where you say, even my curating is a form of writing. Each art object is a sentence. It's a piece of grammar, right? Each art object is a sentence, a room is a paragraph, 6 rooms is an essay. And we've talked about this, and and also I think Carla Severes is also with us tonight, curator. We've talked about this, how curating an exhibition is like composing a score, and it is a story that you're invited into as a viewer. And that is an awesome and beautiful responsibility, and it is it is a story, it is a piece of writing, and you're invited to experience it one after the other, the way that you do reading. So I can see how there's real resonances. Because this is a book piece, but book event 2, it's not my style, but apparently it's book event style. Would you read something for us from the book?
This is stagecraft, because it's already been chosen. Thank you, everybody. So many friends in the audience.
Yay.
Thank you to all my friends who've come out tonight. Thank you. And this really, this is a dream. I mean, all I've ever wanted was to be Joan Didion. No, I've never wanted to be Fran. Fran stops writing too early for me.
Okay.
Also, Joan was so thin. And 147 that's not heavyweight. And I think the pandemic and menopause kind of maybe pushed me into the heavyweight realm. It's a little higher than that. I've asked myself fairly regularly over the past 3 decades, why do I love art? I love art because it's difficult. I think the world is an incredibly complex place, and art is an amazing lever for cracking the case. Art is a form of knowledge. It's a practice of investigation, parens, science, journalism, observation, close parens, married to the human capacity for and the drive toward play, condensation. Art is a site where contradictions are engines rather than obstacles. Indeed, art may be one of our most beautifully designed tools for permitting, managing, and valorizing contradiction. I love that art maintains an aura of impenetrability, of obscurity. I love the way art acts like it's a secret, but often does so in public space. I love the way art condenses the feeling, time, and space to a point of mutual imbrication of the agency of the person who makes it with the agency of the person who looks at it. I love art because I love artists. They are the last people in the world who get to say no with impunity. I love the ethics of being an artist. To decide every day that you are one, that you have to be one, and that you, and only you, determines what that means. For all of the reasons enumerated above, art helps me understand, think through, and enact love and freedom. These two big ideas are my intellectual and affective lodestars. Art doesn't merely represent those things for me. It enacts them. It is them. Art is not a picture of love. It is love. The acts of making it, preserving it, displaying it, writing about it, all of these are events in which one makes oneself permeable to the other. This vulnerability is sometimes draped in elitism or obscurantist language, but I find those affects or responses to be brittle, designed to protect the truth that the desire of art is to exceed oneself and to meet the other on mutual terms. This is central to the event of art, and that impulse is one I associate with love. Similarly, art is not a picture of freedom. It is freedom. To say this is to register that art doesn't merely represent things. Art behaves. It does things. For me, art is not inert. It is constantly active in ways both intellectual and animistic. It's terribly romantic to think of the artist as someone involved in unalienated labor. By now, we are all far too familiar with the commodifiability, well, that's not a good word, of everything, even the moon. And yet part of art's DNA, part of its power, comes from the pocket of resistance or denial or rejection of the gnawing forces of repression, parens, state, social, financial, psychic, that structure our daily lives. For all of the reasons art is a form of love, it is for me also a form of freedom. And there's a picture going by Carrie of the two figures running, the naked black man and the naked black woman running across the prairie, but it's actually a piece of concrete. There it is.
There it is.
So there's a picture of love and freedom.
Your lodestars, love and freedom.
And that's I know I'm not supposed to say that, but that's my favorite Carrie James Marshall painting.
Really?
100%.
Interesting.
And you know why I love that Carrie James Marshall painting?
Why?
Because the dude has a necklace on, and the necklace is flying behind him. Everybody go and read your Walter Benjamin tonight about the angel novellas. And the necklace flies behind him, and on it is a pendant in the shape of Africa.
That's right.
Painted red, black, and green, the colors of the Pan-African flag. So they're running, and they're free, and they're in love. But man, you cannot outrun history.
That's right.
Can't do it.
So you are one of the people that I know best who knows how to see really, really well. This is a great moment to talk about your love of painting. You have a big section devoted in the book, and of course, since Carrie introduced us, it would be criminal of us not to focus on the topic of painting. And of course, you have his essay, Lisa Yuskavich, several others. And we, of course, as we said, worked together on Carrie James Marshall, Luke Toymans before that, and and Noah Davis. So what is it about painting, after everything you've been through, after everything we've been through, after everything we're going through, what is it about painting that still makes you, that still centers you, that still makes you believe, that still makes you cry, that still makes you believe?
Well, when I talk about painting, I talk about it in the Western tradition. So, mid-1400s forward, which gives us, what is that, 600 years? I skipped a lot of the math classes in high school. So I like a lot of things about painting. I like how old it is. So I like when you talk about painting, if you're talking about a painting made today, you are talking about something that has in its DNA centuries of information. I like the fact that painting does something. Well, first off, let me organize myself. Painting is a trick, just FYI, where you represent the three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional canvas. And in that trick, I've seen more truths produced than I've seen in a lot of other arenas. So I'm very curious about the function of the illusion that is painting. One of the things I love about painting is a place where the rules of the world as they exist for us here, like let's just start with the most basic one, gravity, is not at play. So painting is a place where people can really explore ideas and feelings and concepts and history and processes and narrative with a degree of suspension of the terms of everyday life. This suspension, it seems to me, is crucial because it allows a field of inquiry to happen without as many of the things that interfere with our ability to think outside of our current circumstances. So in paintings, you are never subject to whataboutism, which is which is where we are right now, right? We tell someone that we'd like the word to be different, and the world says back to us, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about that? And I just think like, I need to think for a minute outside of these terms in order to see the terms, in order to see what we're doing. But really what painting does for me more than any other type of art making is it instantiates for me something that Freud talks about in the unconscious, which is the capacity of the human brain for condensation, in which mutually irreconcilable things can exist simultaneously in a painting. They can be condensed to a point that they cannot be unimbricated from each other. Like one of the things science does is unimbricate imbricated things. And painting is one of these places where the longer you look at a great painting, the harder it gets, the more complicated the picture gets. Because it can hold an extraordinary degree of contradiction. And to become good at looking at that thing, at thinking that thing, at feeling alongside those things, that to me that's staggering. That's staggering. And that person is also bringing in, they cannot help but be bringing in, because of the nature of the discourse of painting, the last 600 years of all those pictures, which is where the museum is crucial, right? One way to talk about how museums were formed is to talk about the Louvre and how Jacques-Louis David, the artist, takes over the king's castle and is like, actually, this will be for us now. It'll be for the artists so that they could go and look and then go back and make their picture of their moment. So like, I don't know a better conveyor of the extraordinary enterprise that is trying to understand human history so that you understand where you are right now. For me, that is painting.
Yeah, beautifully, beautifully said. And when we care for those paintings, we're not just caring for those paintings, we're caring for the people who made those paintings.
That part. And when we care for those paintings, we are also caring for audiences in the future that we don't know.
Yeah. And we're caring for the people who are looking at that painting. And I've also found that with really great painting, sometimes I need to grow up to understand. Like I did not get Twombly till I was like deep in my 40s. Was the first time I said, that's actually kind of interesting. It took me a long time because there's so much time and wisdom in these paintings. And it's weird, right? Because photography captures this moment, right? And paintings, as you say, they capture a moment, but they're such a condensed moment. They can contain centuries and centuries, both in their medium and in the symbolic construction that they're conveying to you. And sometimes you have to wait a long time to get that wisdom, to see them well.
So long. That's one of the things I do love about museums. I know this is going to sound totally old-fashioned, but I like the ones that put the stuff up and then don't move it.
And what?
Don't move it. I like to go back and test myself against that thing. Like and that's not only painting. Like I said this last night at the University of Chicago. Every time I'm in Chicago, I try to go to the Art Institute so I can see Ava Hess's hang-up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can think about it over time. But the painting thing that I think is also really interesting, paintings also, great ones, maybe let me be serious, let me be real, because I'm a total snob. There are great paintings, there are good paintings, there are average paintings, there are bad paintings. I'm a sports girl. Like, I watch basketball. You know what I mean? Like, they're really good basketball players. They're bench players. They're players who are never going to make the cut. They're really good street ballers. Like, you know, I got criteria. A really great painting is a painting that can withstand the time travel.
And that keeps changing when you keep revisiting it.
Or keep staying the same, but can handle it.
Right. So I know people want to know. So who are you looking at now, and what are some of the artists we should be thinking about now, and who are some of your favorite artists now? It's not Carrie. Don't do that.
I'm always excited when I see a new painting of Carrie's.
I know.
Got my weight wrong. About. You know, I kind of don't think like that anymore.
I don't believe you, but okay.
Yeah, no. No, it's actually true. When I worked in a museum as a curator of contemporary art, I thought part of my job was to stay current, was to try and stay abreast of the new developments, as they say. And, you know, when I engaged in some betting, I tried to pick the winners and avoid the losers. I mean, Carrie said we had to come here and sling mud.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like that's my job anymore. That's not my job, because I don't think of myself as a curator anymore.
You don't?
No, not at all. A
What do you
curator,
think of yourself as now?
a word seller.
Interesting.
I sell words. I got advice, I got opinions, I got stories. A curator for me is someone who is entrusted with the care of a collection of objects. And I am not that person. So I organize exhibitions.
Yeah.
But I never use the phrase independent curator. I don't think of myself as that anymore. Probably because I'm a literal person, like I have this kind of Amelia Bedelia quality.
I know.
But also because I had to accept that I didn't have that role. And so part of accepting the change in my own life meant renaming myself and not carrying that word with me, not carrying that role with me. So I don't run around anymore like a crazy person to look at every gallery. I spent 3 hours in the Manet Degas show recently.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I recently spent a day in the Kunsthistorisches in Vienna. I got to go to Pompeii this summer, and that's what I'd like to talk about. Like, for all you cats out there wondering what's new, Pompeii.
Got it.
Go
Okay.
to Pompeii. Get thyself to Pompeii.
Daniel, do I have time to ask one more question? Then we can open it up to the audience, and if people want to leave when we light up, is that okay? I can't see you. You're going to say it's okay. I'm going to say you said it's okay. Okay. One more question.
One more question.
So lodestars are love and freedom. Another lodestar is a kind of politics. And I want to ask you about a queer perspective on your writing, on your work. It's important to you. It's who you are. Your exhibition, Related Writings, have a political dimension, work ethic, very invested in various kinds of labor. This will have been, really extraordinary work that that kind of tied up the inheritance of feminist art from the 70s and the presence of HIV/AIDS. And then, you wrote this book before this book that we talked about where you really, with Lisa Yuskavage being one of your favorite essays, where you said, okay, my queerness is intimately tied up with my aesthetics. It's intimately bound up. So can you talk to us about your book, yourself, the art, what art history do you want to leave behind for all of us to walk the world with through a queer perspective?
Talking about what it means that I'm queer is one of the hardest things I've ever tried to figure out. On the one hand, it's very straightforward. I have always been interested in women. That has meant, in a patriarchal world, something very different than what it means like in my home or in my bed. So my queerness on the one hand is rooted in, my libido and who I have been able to have a profound emotional engagement with. The most profound relationship in my life has been with my wife of 23 years. And for a while I often used to describe myself as queer. But now, at 57 years old, after 23 years of monogamous marriage, I describe myself as a lesbian. I'm a nice old lady who likes another nice old lady, and we live together in what used to be called a Boston marriage. One of the things that means is that we move through the world, and one of the things we always see is heterosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that means is that we often see things that other people don't see. Because heterosexuality is like the air. It's like the water. It structures every single thing about life. And so I am someone accustomed to having to jump through extraordinary mental, emotional, intellectual hoops in order to identify with the situation going on in front of me. You know, just basics. In a movie, I am both Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Just the basics, just right there, just at that dumb a level. That's the bullshit I'm going through when I'm watching that movie. So, but it turns out that that's a superpower. It turns out that's a great way to look at art. Askance, askew, against the grain. It turns out when you're queer, or just a good old-fashioned lesbian, you've lived a life in which you could not believe everything you were told. In fact, you couldn't believe a lot of what you were told and survive. You had to find your way, as you said earlier, through the dogma, past the lies, into what the truth was. It meant you had to be. It meant there was a day in every queer person's life where you realize, like, oh, snap. I am not like all these other clowns. I'm a mime. Like, you really realize, like, I am not part of this. I am not part of my family. I am not part of my classroom. I am not part of this discourse. I am not part of this economy. You know, it's Helen Sissou says, you know, the lesbian stands outside the economy. And yet, all of those things, I think, have contributed to my sense of why art is so important. Art has always been that place, like I was reading in the quote, you know, of a little bit of obscurantism, of difficulty, of resistance, of to make something beautiful that also says no. Queer.
You have fought for visibility. You have fought for belonging. You have fought the way that art fights. And our artist trustee, Lorna Simpson, she said something about you back when that shit show happened at the museum that won't be named. She said, women who have a point of view and stand by it are often punished. Just because you get rid of Helen Molesworth doesn't mean you've solved the problem. No way, motherfucker. We're putting the lights up. You can come and go as you wish, but don't forget to stay to sign the book. We're putting the lights up in case you have questions or observations, but I know all of us want to say, Helen, the world would not be the same without you. And we thank you. Happy to take any observations or questions. I don't know if there's a roving mic, but I will repeat it if I can. There is. There we go. And thank you for coming. As you leave, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Helen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here and to hear your amazing talk. I have a very, I don't know if it's a question or not, but I'm going to ask it. You talked about like the paint, like there is good painting and medium and bad painting. I would like to know, in your opinion, what does the good painting mean and what does a bad painting mean? Thank you.
You want to know how the sausage is made. I have a couple different criteria for what a good painting is. And they might seem anodyne. It's hard, you know what I mean? I hope that this tracks. One version of a good painting is to feel, as the viewer, that you are in the presence of someone who understands not only the plastic physical materiality of the things that make a painting, right? That they understand brushstroke and color and composition and form and things of that nature. But that they also understand, for me, this makes a good painting, that 600-year tradition that they're part of. The people who show up and are like, think that they just like did something new, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested actually in this thing that we have that has sustained a 700-year, 600-year conversation. I'm interested in the history of the medium as part of what the medium does and what we can say about the medium. I'm interested in the way paintings carry all of that information with them. Then, I'm also interested in something ineffable, which is, and I think this is very much how I was trained. You know, I was trained as a kind of, theoretical social art historian. So I'm interested in paintings that produce, as part of their field of inquiry, the contradictions of the moment that they find themselves in. Because that's one of the reasons I go to painting. I go to painting not to be mollified, not to be assured, not to be represented, not to be... I don't go to paintings for any kind of therapeutic moment. I go to paintings to actually for a kind of assessment of the terms of engagement of the present. So the painting already has to do to... right? Then, because I am a Taurus with a Scorpio rising, then you know that shit's gotta look good. And even if it's about the most horrific thing, Goya, I am interested in the effect of the visual on my cortex, on my embodied sense of knowledge. I'm interested in having a palpable physical response to the thing. And then it's got to be really smart. On top of all of that, then it also has to engage my intelligence. So if I go and see a painting and it's beautiful, and it knows something about history, and it's got a sense of the difficulties of the current moment, but I can read it all like that,
That's advertising.
I need it to resist my apprehension. I want it to fight with me a little bit. I want to wrestle with it.
We're at 7:15, so unless you have, oh, there's a question over there. Again, feel free to get up and go if, because we're past time. And thank you, as if you're leaving, thank you.
You mention art as interested in the object, and I wondered if you ever read Martin Heidegger's essay, Origin of the Work of Art, where he discusses the concept of object and art.
I read Heidegger's The Origin of the Work of Art sometime in the 90s, and I confess, between the legal weed, the pandemic, and everything else that's happened, I might not be ready to entertain that argument now.
Can you help us
What
with one
he
sentence?
did was dismiss the concept of object, that art rises above it. And my reading of it.
Yeah. I don't, yeah. I remember why I don't like Heidegger. Yeah, I don't buy that. The art object is, we humans make objects.
Yeah.
I happen to be a bit of a fetishist, and I really love art objects. But there are certain other objects that do a lot of what I just said a painting does. I can find in certain decorative objects, I can find in vernacular architecture, I can find in photography. Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, when I say object, I'm not thinking about it in a Heideggerian sense at all. I'm actually thinking about even something like this has so much information is in this thing. And I've always been very interested in the way things in the made world carry extraordinary amounts of information because they've been made by human beings. When I look at this, I am someone who is extremely aware that how many people were in a room that signed off on this, that made this. And I'm very interested in that. So I'm not, I don't really, at the end of the day, do I put art objects higher than other objects? Do I? I don't know. I don't think that I do.
Okay,
I'm just a fetishist.
It's a aesthetic about where truth dwells. That's where I came in on it. But just curious.
Yeah. Thank you, though. Anybody else? One more? Awesome. Thank you.
Is this on? Hi there, I'm Chloe. I'm part of the MCA Emerge group, and what you said about what defines or what are some potential characteristics of good art. I'm thinking about, is this something that's more of a sort of like an institutional approach? Because I'm thinking, is this something that, as far as people who are collecting for institutions, they will look at as, oh, how does this work, or how is this artist thinking about sort of canon of art history? And like for me, I'm thinking, for performance or some of these marginalized groups, right? I mean, when I think about the canon of art history, often it's Western. I was art history major at Northwestern. I literally have no idea what happened after 1800. I have no idea. So I
Some
kind of,
stuff.
There's some cool stuff, but I like your approach, but at the same time, it makes it more difficult for me sometimes to understand, queer artists or performance, or can we still, I don't know if I'm making sense, but as far as like the sort of continuation of art history and using that as a sort of criteria, this is something which is a hallmark of art that withstands the test of time.
So we we have a conundrum, it seems to me, in art history, in the discipline as it has been established, again, in Germany, 18th century, and it's handmade. You know, art history is kind of born before the museum. In the museum, one of the reasons the museum emerges is because art history as a discipline, as an academic discipline, needed a place to display its objects of study, right? So other disciplines didn't need that, but art history, the history of art, needs a place to display its objects of study. And over this multi-century period, we have developed a set of criteria for what is good and what is not good art. And that criteria governs both the academy and the museum, both, because it's a bifurcated discipline, but it is still one discipline. We know the degree to which that criteria was formed under and within, I don't know what the actual physical arrangements are, I don't know what the right word to use, but that criteria was formed by an extraordinarily small group of people to serve the aims of power, colonial power, white power, European power, right? So by the time we get to the 20th century in America and we start to think about what are the criteria, we realize that the criteria we are working with are fundamentally flawed because they're racist and sexist and classist and homophobic. This means that they are part of the world we live in, because the world we live in is structured by those forces. So we have a real problem on our hands, which is we don't have an agreed upon set of criteria because we understand that the criteria was so flawed. However, I don't think that means there's no criteria because I watch too much basketball. So I know that some people do stuff better than other people do stuff. Whether it's cooking or dancing or making money or making pictures or running museums. I could no sooner have run this museum for 15 years because I don't have the skills. And I don't think Madeleine could have been me because I don't think she has the skills. So that doesn't mean, though, that we throw out our need for criteria. So how we talk to each other about shit. And you know what? Just because one person doesn't make food as good as another person, that's not the be-all and end-all of life. It's okay to be a B-team painter. It's okay to be a C-team painter. I mean, I know my publisher isn't here. One day in the not too near future, this will be for sale for $297 outside
Don't say that
Strand
now.
on a cart.
Helen.
This is not going to be Walter Benjamin. This is not what this is.
Cut the mic. Man, it's 7:25. You could have waited 1 minute, man.
I think it's worth talking about why you think something's better than another. And I think that there are some people in the world. We have spent decades looking at art, reading about art, thinking about art. We are called experts.
And if you want, you really should want to buy this really expensive book, evidently. So
Buy it now before it's on sale.
So if you would let Helen go up without, handshakes and questions, really, and then buy her book, That would be awesome. So thank you.